Park Avenue, synonymous for decades with New York glamour and success, now sorrowfully linked to the Big Apple's worst mass shooting in 25 years. What are the key unanswered questions in the Jeffrey Epstein case? Investigative journalist Barry Levine has 9 on his mind and joins us to explain. How do presidents use the autopen? Who controls it? Under what conditions? We try to find out. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. The murder rate in America has been declining for 3 years. New York City had fewer murders last year than in 2023, matching the national trend. Shootings not resulting in homicides have declined in New York City and nationally also for 3 straight years. These statistics, highly relevant to the big picture of life in America, look and feel feeble and brittle against the horrors that played out yesterday in Midtown Manhattan inside a skyscraper on Park Avenue, which has many tenants, among them the headquarters of the National Football League. The National Football League is a global sports colossus. No surprise that it's located on one of the oldest and most venerated streets in the Big Apple. Park Avenue, you see, dates to the 1830s and grew in breadth and prominence, as did America's most important city. In popular culture, Park Avenue was a point of reference in a hit 1960s sitcom on CBS, Green Acres. The address oozed gaudy privilege in Tom Wolfe's lacerating novel on 1980s economic excess, The Bonfire of the Vanities. Park Avenue received appreciative treatment from The Simpsons, the TV show Different Strokes, and even from rock and roll poet Lou Reed. For most of its life in New York City, Park Avenue meant wealth, sophistication, and not incidentally, safety. Now it will be recorded in the annals of one of New York's worst mass shootings, and also a place where a disturbing upward trend in American crime, killings of on or off-duty law enforcement officers, took another shattering turn. Diderul Islam, a New York City police officer, was killed in that shooting. He was working off-duty as a security guard, part of an NYPD-approved program that supplements corporate security teams and allows NYPD officers to make a little extra money. Islam was a father of 2. His now grieving wife is expecting their 3rd child next month. Last year, 147 law enforcement officers were killed in America, a 25% increase over 2023. On the Senate floor today, Democratic leader Charles Schumer, a native of New York City, tried to put this tragedy into some kind of words.
When an NYPD officer is killed doing his duty, it's not just a tragedy, it's a rupture in the soul of our city, our beloved city. And it requires that we mourn and honor all those we lost. And this just happened 4 blocks from my office, in broad daylight, in one of the busiest, safest, most iconic parts of Manhattan, right across from where New Yorkers pour in and out of work.
We begin tonight with Anna Schechter in our broadcast center in New York. Anna, what else have we learned today? Because this has rattled the city of New York.
It sure has, Major. And just the motive that investigators are sharing with CBS News, that he targeted the NFL offices, as you explained, located in that office tower in Midtown Manhattan. He blamed CTE, a brain injury that professional athletes get from contact sports, particularly football. Now, this perpetrator, he played high school football, but in his notes found in his wallet on his person at the scene of the crime, obtained by CBS News, he writes CTE, please study my brain. He notes other professional athletes or other football players, professional athletes who died by suicide as a result of CTE. And so investigators believe that fueled him to drive all the way across the country in that black BMW that he was driving, carrying that AR-style weapon. When he parked it nearby the Park Avenue skyscraper, he just walked out in broad daylight not even efforting to conceal that gun, and walked right into the building and opened fire, Major.
And it's been reported that there were some known mental health issues with this perpetrator, yet he was still able
That's
to
right.
legally obtain this AR-style rifle. There's point one. I'd like you to explore that, and also let us know how this has changed the idea of security within office towers in that neighborhood and throughout Manhattan.
They're two great questions, and I'm so glad that you brought up this issue of him being able to obtain a concealed carry permit, a firearm permit in the state of Nevada, despite having multiple documented mental health episodes. In fact, what we learned today was that he initially obtained that concealed carry permit in the spring of 2022. And then within likely a few months or not too long, within a year after that, he wound up calling police because of suicidal ideation. So he was having suicidal thoughts. He called law enforcement. They checked him out, and law enforcement determined that suicidal ideation did not meet the bar of having him lose that concealed carry license. So that, I think, will raise big questions about what police in Nevada knew and how they handled his situation. So I want to talk about security in New York City, because as local bystanders spoke to our own cameras overnight and this morning, they were saying, this should not happen in our city in broad daylight. How is this happening? And if you remember, just in December, less than a year ago, Luigi Mangione carried out an attack, a murder in broad daylight. So I think big questions are going to be asked, and I think there's going to be a big push to increase security in Midtown going forward.
Anna Schechter with so many vital details. I appreciate it very, very much. I'm going to turn now to the economy and some new numbers that show Americans might just have a more positive outlook on things. The Consumer Confidence Index rose 2 points compared to last month. All this a day before the Federal Reserve announces its latest decision on interest rates. I think we know what's going to happen, but Kelly O'Grady will fact check me on that. Kelly, great to see you. We have a sense, or at least the market has a sense, of what isn't going to happen tomorrow, correct?
That's right. The market's pricing in a 97% chance that the Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady, Major.
Okay. And what do we interpret, if anything, from this upward tilt in consumer confidence?
What it tells you is that consumers are getting more comfortable with the uncertainty of the trade policy. They are seeing trade deals get done. They are understanding now that the tariff rate is not going to be 0% or a baseline 10%, but most of the deals that we've seen get done are higher. But what did really stand out to me is that overall consumer confidence. It tracks how people are feeling about the economy, their financial situation, the labor market. But you can actually break that down into how they're feeling currently about the situation and how they're feeling about things in 6 months. We actually saw a bigger increase if you look at the 6-month picture, but a drop if you look solely at that current picture. And what really stood out was people feel concerned about the labor market. They're saying that it's taking longer to find a job. They're concerned that there aren't as many positions open. Now, I always say this, just because a consumer feels that way, it's their point of view, doesn't mean that's actually what the data says. But that nugget anecdotally makes me feel a little bit nervous about that Friday jobs report. We have seen a slowing labor market, and from all of the analysts that I'm talking to, and of course that nugget that I just mentioned from a consumer's point of view, we are expecting to see that slow. So going back to the Federal Reserve, we're expecting it to remain unchanged tomorrow. But Friday and sort of the labor market picture and how it evolves, that's going to be really important of whether we get a cut in September.
And Kelly, just to button up something you and I discussed last night, there was a reference made by President Trump, and we talked about it, $600 billion in European Union investment in the United States. Heads of the European Commission said today they have no control over that. That's entirely up to private businesses within the European Union countries, all 27 of them. No guarantee that investment's going to happen. It very well might, but it's not for sure.
That's correct. The European Commission, the European Union, they can't mandate legally, this country does this. It's really going to be up to the businesses, whether it be pharmaceutical companies with potential sector tariffs, and what they're going to do to invest in the U.S. in the future.
Kelly O'Grady, I appreciate it very much. Quick programming note, tomorrow I'm going to be joined live here in studio by White House trade advisor Peter Navarro. We'll get into his reaction about the federal interest rate decision, whatever it might be, and so much happening on the trade and tariff front. Now to a CBS News investigation into the death of Jeffrey Epstein. The missing minute, you might have heard or read something about this recently, in the surveillance footage at the jail where the convicted sex offender died in 2019 may not be missing after all. The Justice Department released nearly 11 hours of that footage last month, including this moment where the time code jumps forward 1 minute before midnight. A source tells CBS News the FBI actually has a copy of the video without that cut. Now, it's unclear why it wasn't released originally. Our investigation found other inconsistencies with the video as well. To share his new reporting on this, Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, what do we know?
Our CBS News investigation led by Dan Rutnick finds that there are some issues with whatever that video was that was released by the U.S. Department of Justice. Was it an original or was it a copy? Forensic reviews of the video indicate it was a copy of a video, not the raw original thing. That's a pressing issue because the deputy FBI director said they were going to release the raw video. There are certain moments where you see a cursor on the screen of the video, the way you would if you were recording it maybe off your phone from a screen that was showing the initial video. There's metadata and indications of edits in the video that this is not the original, raising the question, is there a missing minute or is there a missing minute from the edit of the footage? There's other concerns as well, including consistencies that may be called into question based on what the Department of Justice said about this footage. Take a look.
Epstein was held at the Metropolitan Corrections Center in Lower Manhattan in a unit separate from the general population known as the Special Housing Unit, or SHU. The unit has 3 wings, each with 2 levels. Epstein was held in the upstairs L tier of his wing. That tier is accessed by a set of stairs from the central common area. Directly adjacent to those stairs is the officers' station, where on-duty corrections officers spend most of their time. The Inspector General report says several cameras in the unit were streaming a live feed to a remote location in the prison, but no one was watching them. Malfunctioning equipment meant only one camera recorded the general area. That camera captured part of the common area, including the officers' station and a sliver of the staircase leading to Epstein's cell. The footage begins at 7:40 p.m. the night before Epstein's death. You can see staff and inmates moving about, preparing for the nightly lockdown. That's the officers' station in the background. Only 2 employees have been publicly identified. Tova Noel, a corrections officer pulling a double shift that began at 4 p.m., and Michael Thomas, a materials handler who won't arrive until midnight. Epstein is seen for the first and only time on camera at 7:49 p.m. when the Department of Justice said he was escorted to his cell from another wing of the unit. It's important to note here, you don't actually see Epstein ascend the stairwell to his cell block.
Pressed for comment from the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Office of Inspector General, which did its own review of this matter, and they didn't respond to our request for comment. Major, if there is a full video, unedited, without a missing minute, it has not been released.
And this is not incidental to the broader conversation among interested parties in the Jeffrey Epstein matter. Online, this has been gone over and over as people try to deduce or understand what isn't or is there, what they can glean in terms of transparency about Epstein's death.
So much of what gave this oxygen over the past few years is open-ended questions, or conspiracy theories feed off of unanswered questions. That's the fuel. And what you have here is a bunch of questions that haven't been answered. So if the Trump administration is trying to put this issue and this controversy behind them, pending open questions are just oxygen for that fire.
An important investigation. Scott McFarland with all the crucial details. I thank you very much. Still to come, the mysteries of Jeffrey Epstein. Investigative reporter Barry Levine has tracked him for decades. The 9 critical questions he says need answering. That's next. 6 months after the deadly commercial airliner and Black Hawk helicopter collision here in D.C., lawmakers push a new aviation safety bill. President Truman was the first to use an autopen. While President Trump does too, he's enraged by how often President Biden did and for what. We will talk with President Clinton's autopen staffer about the do's and don'ts. That's ahead on The Takeout. Welcome back. There are many questions surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein case. My next guest says there are 9 really important ones, and he wrote them down in an opinion piece in the New York Times. His name is Barry Levine. He has reported on Jeffrey Epstein for about a decade and is the author, The Spider, Inside the Criminal Web of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Barry joins me now. Barry, great to have you with me. I'm going to drive my folks in the control room berserk because this is terrible television, but it's great conversation. So I'm going to read your 9 questions. Question 1. How did Mr. Epstein make his money, and how did he finance his sex trafficking over 2 decades? 2. Did Mr. Epstein have any ties to spy agencies? 3. Are there references to Mr. Trump, meaning President Trump, in the files that add to our knowledge of his relationship with Mr. Epstein? 4. What about Bill Clinton? 5. Who were the clients implicated in Mr. Epstein's sex trafficking operation? 6. Who helped Mr. Epstein overseas? 7. What did investigators find in Mr. Epstein's safe, computers, and other property? 8. What do the videos show? And 9. What is in Mr. Epstein's autopsy report? Barry, I listed the 9. What are the most important of the 9?
Well, I'm constantly getting hit, Major, with questions about Jeffrey Epstein's death. And I think it's black and white. Let's get that autopsy report out to the American public. There's no reason for the government to be holding that back. And let's learn once and for all, did Jeffrey Epstein have any defensive wounds on his hands? Was he trying to possibly fight off an assailant? Let's get more details about the noose that was used. And also the death investigation. A couple quick questions here. What about DNA evidence? Was there DNA evidence on the bed sheets that he used to, the government says, to hang himself? What about foreign DNA? What else do we know about the past suicide attempt? And was there any evidence corroborating that? I wrote in my book that there were inmates who heard bed sheets being ripped up that night that Jeffrey Epstein apparently used to take his life. So let's get to the bottom of that, first of all.
And Barry, what about the conversation I just had with Scott McFarlane about the release of the surveillance footage of that night within the corrections facility itself?
Yeah, I mean, that was an excellent report from Scott. I was just watching that. We don't have really any more videos beyond that. We were told that the other videos in that unit had malfunctioned. And of course, the guards were, falling asleep that night. So they had falsified reports in which they were reprimanded. But the issue I have certainly is, and I went about this in my book, could there have been some type of conspiracy to take him out or allow him to take his life? I know from my investigation that it would have been virtually impossible, unless there was a major conspiracy in that jail, for others to enter that cell, because that cell block was actually controlled by a main guard station where even the guards upstairs had to alert the main control area if they were going to open doors and so forth. So, we'll never know in terms of the deficiencies in the video that the government put out. And it is troubling that we have, as Wired Magazine had initially reported, that there were gaps in that tape. So, I think at this point we need to see the raw tape and at least put that material out so we can help understand what's happening here.
Barry, what about question number 2? Did Mr. Epstein have any ties to spy agencies? Remind my audience why that is a very important question.
Well, it's a very important question because there was a belief for years that Jeffrey Epstein was getting compromised material on very wealthy and powerful individuals and also people connected to different political parties, not only in the United States, but also he had ties to politicians in Israel, and there has been a belief that he might have been had ties to not only the U.S. government intelligence, but also the Israeli Mossad. We know for a fact that his co-conspirator, Ghislaine Maxwell, her father, Robert Maxwell, who was a famous publisher, wealthy publisher in London on Fleet Street, had extensive spy asset ties to the Israelis and also to the British government. So, you know, it's all come together in a sense of, was Jeffrey Epstein an intelligence asset? We know that at the time of the slap on the wrist conviction in 2008 in Florida, that Alexander Acosta, who was then the U.S. attorney, who helped make that deal come together, he said that Jeffrey Epstein was part of intelligence and that the decision in terms of the slap on the wrist agreement was above his head. So we still have questions, and I'm hoping that the FBI files could shed some light on that.
About 2 minutes to go, Barry. Talk to my audience, diagram for them the Donald J. Trump and the William Jefferson Clinton of it all.
Well, I mean, these are two prominent names that we know Jeffrey Epstein has been connected to, along with, you know, Prince Andrew from the royal family. And now we know for a fact that it's been disclosed that President Trump is indeed in the files. It doesn't necessarily mean any wrongdoing, but I think as the sitting president, initially we should see the references to him. And of course, if there's any third parties mentioned or victims mentioned, their names should be redacted. But let's see the context in which President Trump is referenced in those files. And Jeffrey Epstein also had a very close relationship with Bill Clinton, the former president. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell knew Clinton for many years. In fact, Epstein and Maxwell paid several visits to the White House and were given exclusive tours by Bill and Hillary Clinton. So Bill Clinton has not been acknowledged in terms of any wrongdoing. Neither him nor President Trump have ever been investigated by law enforcement related to Jeffrey Epstein. But I think it's important to see the context of the information that the FBI files have on not only those two powerful men, but the others.
Barry, this story is going to continue. I hope you come back because you shed important light on all of it. Barry Levine, investigative journalist and author. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major.
Despite decades of evidence about the dangers of climate change, the Environmental Protection Agency wants to repeal its landmark finding that greenhouse gases pose a threat to the public. The EPA director called it the holy grail behind such regulations. What undoing it could mean. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thank you for hanging out with us. Here is a look at what else we and now you are watching this evening. The United Kingdom will recognize a Palestinian state in September unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire and speeds up food deliveries. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's announcement follows France's decision to recognize the state of Palestine at the UN, also in September. Both moves appear designed to elevate political aspirations of stateless Palestinians suffering starvation in Gaza and encroachments in the West Bank as Israel's war with Hamas continues. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded to the UK decision on social media, writing in part, "A jihadist state on Israel's border today will threaten Britain tomorrow." The FBI says it has seized more than $2.4 million in cryptocurrency from the chaos ransomware group known as Ours. The group's targets are primarily inside the United States, and it typically demands ransoms up to $300,000 in cryptocurrency to unlock illegally seized data. Many recent victims of this ransomware attack reside in Texas. In a massive policy reversal, the Environmental Protection Agency now says greenhouse gases no longer endanger human health, thus abolishing the legal basis undergirding regulations that limit emissions from motor vehicles and power plants. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin made the announcement today. It cancels a 2009 EPA finding that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases pose a threat to public health and welfare. CBS News national environmental correspondent David Schechter joins me now. David, I'm so glad you're with us. This reads to me like extremely big news.
It is huge news, Major, and it'd be nice if the government didn't use terms like endangerment finding, because it's not clear on its face what that means. But what they're saying, they're calling this endangerment finding. It is the basis of all regulation of climate change in the United States. It's essentially the only tool that the government really has. It stems from a court case back in 2007 that said our emissions from our cars and our power plants could be regulated, could be considered pollutants. And so then the EPA went back and said, okay, if these are considered pollutants, we need to now prove that they endanger public health, which they did. And now we've had many years of using the endangerment finding as the basis for the regulation. In fact, like less emissions from our tailpipes of our cars. That number has fallen significantly over the years. That is specifically because of the endangerment finding, emissions from power plants, from factories. It really has been the backbone of our climate policy in this country.
And David, to that point, industry has adjusted to those regulations. Industry has adapted to those regulations. Do we imagine industry is going to say, well, we're just going to go back to the bad old days of being polluters?
It's a great question. I think partially, if you have a crystal ball, let's take a look at it. But a lot of changes have been made. A lot of changes have been made in the way we make cars, that the emissions are down. Would companies then go back and throw out the equipment and the processes that they've used? Probably not. There's also a lot of court action that will probably follow here. And so you'd probably, if you had big investments, you might want to wait on the sidelines to see what that looks like. The Supreme Court has decided not to deal with this question in the past, as late as 2023, and let lower courts' findings stand. And now there is some concern amongst environmentalists that the Supreme Court has essentially several times now reduced the authority of the EPA. And this new formation in this court, would they take up this question, and would they further erode the authority of the EPA on this really important issue?
David Schechter, always a pleasure to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much. Today marks 6 months since a Black Hawk helicopter collided with a passenger jet near Washington's Reagan National Airport. All 67 people on board, both aircraft, were killed. In response to this tragedy, Republican Senator and Senate Commerce Committee Chairman Ted Cruz today unveiled new legislation he said is aimed at improving aviation safety.
This bill is based on two core principles: technological transparency and institutional responsibility. While American skies are among the safest globally, this safety is not always assured.
Chris Van Cleve joins me now for the first time at the family table. Chris, it's great to see you. What should we make of this legislation and the impetus behind it? What's it trying to solve?
Basically, what we learned in this crash was this helicopter had been flying without a piece of equipment operating that basically gives very good location data. It's a tracker that most aircraft have. The military has a waiver to not necessarily use it. And what we've learned is that often when they were flying these missions around D.C., that system was not on. So if you use any of those flight tracking websites like Flight Radar, that system is what those websites use to tell you where the plane is. It gives very good location data if you're using it. This bill would require that virtually all aircraft use it.
And it also, let me ask you, does it limit the frequency of any of these military helicopter flights in and around a place like DCA?
So the Secretary of Transportation has already done that. They have halted a lot of those flights unless it is for a clear national security, police action, emergency action, and then they halt air traffic around Reagan National Airport. So this bill narrowly looks at safety and tracking technology that they feel should be on all aircraft and needs to be active for the aircraft to be in busy airspace.
This is an emotionally difficult time for the families of those stricken, lost in this catastrophe. I understand you chance to speak to some of them.
The NTSB is going to hold a 3-day investigative hearing for the rest of this week, basically, and we're going to learn a lot more details. And obviously, family members have a lot of questions. This is also going to be an emotional experience for them. We talked to 2 families today about loss and what they're hoping comes out of these hearings. Let's listen.
I believe that we are going to hear some hard news this week as more details come out. I think what we're going to find is that there's not one smoking gun that caused this. It's a perfect storm of failures that occurred across, untold number of organizations that led to this happening.
It does seem like this is an accident that grew out of, everyone involved got comfortable with what at another airport would be flagged as an unsafe situation, a lack of separation. And they got comfortable with it, and then that spacing got closer and closer together. It does feel like it was, part of this was just almost an inertia of...
They had learned to fly in a way where close calls and even invasive action was just normal. And so the problem with that is when you make it normal, you don't find a way to fix it.
So among the things they want done are independent reviews, Inspector General investigations into the FAA and the Army, looking at how that situation was allowed to mission creep the way it did.
And very quickly, Chris, there was conversation immediately after this catastrophe about wokeness and the air traffic controlling and all that sort of stuff. Can we dispel that?
There's been no findings of that. These investigations are ongoing. The NTSB will make a set of recommendations based on those findings. But so far, the makeup of the people in that control tower has not been flagged.
Chris Van Cleve, I appreciate it very much. Podcaster Joe Rogan, I bet you've heard of him, maybe even listened to him. Well, he's not letting the Epstein file controversy go, calling it a line in the sand. Why that could be a problem, putting it mildly, for President Trump. Coming up next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. Joe Rogan, big deal in the Trump echo chamber. Big deal as a podcaster, huge audience. Big deal in the so-called manosphere on podcast land. And President Trump keeps telling people like Joe Rogan and others in the Trump movement, move on from Jeffrey Epstein. Joe Rogan will not move on. Let's listen.
When we thought Trump was going to come in and a lot of things were going to be resolved, we're going to drain the swamp, we're going to figure everything out. And when you have this one hardcore line in the sand that everybody had been talking about forever, and then they're trying to gaslight you on that.
Gaslight you. That's never a compliment. Never, ever, ever. Here with me now to discuss and examine CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist Chuck Rocha. He's the one with the big hat on. Former Republican senior congressional aide Rena Shaw. No hat. Very glad to have you.
Thanks for having us.
This is week 4. I have been covering Donald Trump and the movement around him since August of 2015. There has never been an even 2-week break within that movement where they argue with each other about what is or isn't true or what Donald Trump is or isn't doing properly. It's now week 4. Rena?
I don't see it getting any better. The story doesn't just have legs, it has momentum. Because every week it seems like there are new details, a birthday card, drawings, a really affectionate friendship. I mean, these 2 gentlemen, Epstein, the criminal, and the President of the United States were photographed together. How many times, I don't even know. Numerous times. We all know that.
The photographs predated
his presidency, indeed.
And predated the convictions and pleas entered
But I think it's really important to call it what it is.
They did know each other big time.
Because they were social friends. And that's all that the president needs to say, is that this is somebody I used to know.
And absent transparency, it leads those in the MAGA movement to say, wait a minute, just as Joe Rogan articulated.
I am somebody that
we
feels...
were going to figure it all out.
We need transparency, accountability, and we're not getting it. And it needs to be demanded.
The point you made earlier, I think, is the most important because both of us has followed him for a long time and followed the campaign. I've run campaigns against him. This is why he won this last election. You can say Democrats were weak, and we had a bad candidate, but he kept his coalition together. And, Major, you've talked about this, he brought a lot of new people who normally didn't vote. And you know why they showed up? They listen to Joe Rogan. There's a lot of people in the manosphere who aren't regular primary voters, general voters. Me and you've talked about strategy on this, and me and you've talked about how do you go get a new person to show up to vote who's normally not already in the system. Right. Joe Rogan and them have. That's why this hurts, because we're leading into a midterm election where it's just about turnout. Midterm elections, folks normally vote, and there's not as many of them that show up in an off year because, like my grandmother, they think the election's just every 4 years when we elect a president, but that's not true.
So to that point about those in the younger demographic trend lines of American voters, look at some new CBS polling data, which I find fascinating and possibly at the heart of this whole story when it comes to breaking down whether this constitutes a threat to Trump or not. Look, 18 to 29, February to July, down 27, 30 to 44, down 11, 45 to 64, down 6, 65 and over, down 3. Rena, evaluate.
Big T word here. So we're on the takeout. We're talking Trump. And then you said turnout, but I'm thinking trust is at the core of everything here. And that is exactly what younger voters want. Older voters want it too. But trust is what always gets Trump back in the favorable column with people, because people trust him to keep it real, to say what's on his mind, to not hide things, to not play games. And in essence, what we're seeing with this entire Epstein, now Maxwell fiasco is a lack of trust and a lack of transparency. How are they going to course correct on this when on the campaign trail, he said he would unseal, he said he'd be open, he said he'd let it all out, and we're getting none of that?
So, Chuck, I'm going to play for something. I know you got kind of an intellectual dog in this hunt, Ruben Gallego and his future. He was on the show yesterday. I talked to him about his travel schedule. Let's listen. Iowa, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, they're either on or have been on your travel schedule. You were just elected senator from Arizona. Are you already launching your presidential campaign?
Well, listen, Arizona is the swingiest swing states of all those states. So, first of all, no one talks about the fact that I move all over Arizona a gazillion times. I will continue to travel because I need allies.
You know, it's not a secret to nobody that I work for Ruben Gallego.
Yeah.
Let me say this.
So, I mean, you got a dog.
Let me say this. Ruben Gallego is special. He's a special politician. I've done this for 35 years. There's very few regular people who aren't full of baloney, I'll just say, in politics. Most of them love themselves. They love to see themselves on camera. Ruben's a Marine. He's a Latino. He's from a swing state. And I don't know if he's going to run for president yet. He just had a baby, for God's sakes, and I think he answered the question right. But let me tell you this. He is very special and very connected to people. That's why he overperformed in a Senate state more so than everybody else and got better with Latino men, did better with Kamala Harris by almost 10 points. Just keep your eye on Ruben Gallego.
That phrase, swingiest swing state, hey, I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, and look, you don't show up in these places. All I'm waiting for is a trip to South Carolina. Then I know he's running for president.
And speaking of South Carolina, the Congresswoman Nancy Mace went up to New Hampshire. So It's all. A lot of things are funny right now.
I think as the party's looking for somebody to be the mouthpiece and to push back, like he said yesterday on your interview, I watched the whole thing on pushing back on these Medicaid cuts. I, as a Democrat, whether he runs or he doesn't, he's a good voice to be out there on the road doing that. Again, veteran, Marine, just had a baby boy. Like, these are things he should be talking about.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And for activist voters and base Democrats, he draws a crowd.
Absolutely.
And that's what you all need right now.
He's very good. He's very good on the stump.
Chuck Roach, Rena Shaw.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in. Still over here? Okay, I'll keep looking over there. We've heard a lot lately about the autopen that is used by signature-weary presidents. Oh, those poor babies. So how did this tool become a budding scandal here in D.C.? Well, I'll talk with someone who has had the authority to wield that mechanical device right here on the Takeout. That's next. I don't know what Ted Cruz... Welcome back to the Takeout. President Trump, you've heard this, criticized and even ordered an investigation into how former President Biden used the autopen, specifically about pardons, but there are other matters related to it. The President Trump, calls it one of the biggest scandals in American history. Not sure that's a fair assessment, and here to talk to us about this, not to give us an answer to that question, but to explain how the autopen works, Jack Schock. He had the authority to wield the autopen for about a year during President Clinton's administration. He was the director then for about a year, presidential letters and messages. Jack, I'm glad you're with us. Thanks for joining us. How does the autopen work?
Thank you. Okay, well, the autopen works, it's very simple, actually. So the process itself, it looks a bit like a drawing table or a tilted architecture board with the signature etched in the glass on it. And so when it was time to use the auto pen, much like that you're seeing right now, but actually a little more low tech. And then the pen would come out and literally sign his name like it's doing right now, dot the I and cross the T.
Are there any do's and don'ts?
Sure, there were do's and don'ts for everything. Do's and don'ts were, we used to say it's the second most guarded room in the White House. Of course, after the president. Guarded all day, every day. And a person like me would, I eventually got FBI approval, security clearance to run the machine. And sometimes people would say, above my head would say, this one is for the auto pen or this one is for his real signature. And sometimes I made those decisions.
And what kind of things came across your desk for the auto pen to sign?
It's hard to talk about that, but of course, we preserve the illusion that everybody's letter was signed by the president. But a lot of birthday notes, a lot of messages to people who might be opening a business, maybe, or sometimes notes to people at funerals. It was really dependent on what was going on that day and who needed a response to a letter that we had received. We used to say, does President Clinton read all of his mail, every letter? And I would always say, he gets about 7,000 a day. And that's the answer.
You needed authorization for each use, correct?
Yes, but I also had that authorization. But sometimes somebody above my head would say, this one is okay for the pen, or make sure the president sees this one. So there was never a formula or never any sort of attempt to standardize it. It was very literally what was going on that day and who had written in and what kind of a response they needed. Some people would say, can I get my baseball signed, or can I get my memorabilia signed? That was a don't, because very literally we couldn't get it on the machine.
Right. And this is out of your lane, but the courts have upheld the use of auto pen to sign legislation. It can be used at the president's discretion, correct?
That's correct. All that legislation, of course, happened after I left, but we used to illustrate the power of the pen. We would say it can do anything from sign checks to declare war.
Right. And did the authorization come through the president, the chief of staff, or someone a little bit lower that on the food chain?
If you're talking about daily, I had the authority to do that. The last word was with me. People would say, oh, I need this birthday note to go to fill in the blank. And then I would authorize the use of the pen. When I was hired, then I went through, of course, a secure, very rigid security check, rather. And before I moved up to being able to authorize the pen. And the interesting fact about it is my signature had to go on file with the FBI. So somewhere in all of that is a JRS.
Jack Schock with the do's and don'ts of the presidential auto pen. I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
That does it for the Takeout today. Please tune in tomorrow for my in-studio interview right here at the Conversation Corner with White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro. Please stick around. Daily Report coming up next. CBS News 24/7.